You're listening to
They're gonna call it a hard foul. They're gonna call it a hard foul.
offering in-depth analysis on all things Boston Celtics with your hosts, Jim and Mike Quigley.
Mike, we had a parade. We had a big fucking parade in Boston to celebrate the Celtics championship.
Yeah, you sound really excited about it.
You know me, always super excited about things. And it was a great day. It was a great day to honor a really no stress kind of championship team.
Got my chain, bro.
You don't see it. Mike's got his Duncan's Celtics championship chain. How did you get that?
My employee, her daughter works for the Celtics and got that for Tommy.
That's very cool. You should be wearing it during the pod. Put it on.
I don't think so.
No, put it on. Come on. Do it.
Well, I mean, I don't want to take it out of its package.
Put it on.
I don't want to wear this.
So it was you had a parade. Everyone was there. You had some old Celtics. I guess you have some drama between Perkins and Scalabrine or whatever.
All right.
So that's all fun stuff. And now, Mike, here we are. 1 week. He's got the chain on. Hold it up, like.
Yeah, bro.
There we
Fuck
go.
you, Kyrie.
Spotify now has videos you can watch, so you'll be able to see Mikey and the chain on it if you listen.
Kyrie sucks.
Kyrie sucks.
Yeah, bro.
So, Mike, you're already seeing teams make moves around the league. So leading up into this pod, what we're going to do, we'll go over a little bit. If we want to talk parade, Mike, you can talk parade. We'll talk about made around the NBA, and then we're going to give, as today is draft day, but we don't have a lot to say about the draft. We're not big draft guys, but we're going to give a bit of a retrospective on how the Celtics got here. And it's really interesting, the moves, the luck, all that stuff that's been involved to, build a championship team. Mike, couple trades, Giddey going to Chicago for Caruso, who's going to Oklahoma City. And then you had the big one yesterday. I think it was 5 total picks, or 6 picks in a swap. Mikal Bridges heading to the Knicks, and then Bojan Bogdanovic heading over to the Nets with a shit ton of picks. Start where you want on this, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think as soon as the Knicks re-sign OG, they're certainly trying to get that 5-0 defense to match up with what the Celtics do. And they did it by getting a really talented guy in Bridges coming from the Nets, who's always been a capable defender. I think he was more of an impactful defender when he was in Phoenix. But maybe that was tied to the fact that he was playing meaningful basketball there, where with the Nets, I don't think he was the same player that he was in Phoenix. And I suspect that backcourt with him and Brunson, he's going to bring the same intensity that DiVincenzo brings. So certainly the Knicks are deeper. Be interested to see what the rotations look like.
Yeah,
I think this probably means Hartenstein is gone, but they still have Mitchell Robinson, and they certainly can swing Julius Randle for a different big if they'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a really interesting team and a really good team with really good coaching and tough players. And I still think the Celtics are more talented and would beat the Knicks, but this may be their biggest foe right now. It's the very beginning of the offseason. I would suspect Philadelphia to react to this. And interested to see what Philadelphia does with their boatload of money. But I love it. I love it for the Knicks. I mean, they gave up a lot. And unfortunately, I think to be good, that's what you have to do in today's NBA. You have to give up a lot, and you have to spend a lot of money. If they don't invest in OG, I think that'd be a really big mistake. I heard a stat from Scals today on the ride in to work, and he was just saying in the 14 games that Randall and OG played together, the Knicks were at plus 180. That means they were winning games by an average of 12 to 14 points with those two on the court together. And you look at every statistic with OG on that team, they were one of the best teams in the NBA. So it's a risk. I mean, you give that guy a max contract, you're giving it to a guy who gets hurt a lot. Bridges gets hurt. But you gotta try to beat the Celtics, right? I think the Knicks are sick of getting knocked out in the second round and want to take that next step. As far as the Bulls go,
Well, let's stay with on the next.
Yeah, stay with the Knicks.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. I think it was they need wing defenders, and it was the area in which the Celtics abused them all season long. The Knicks won that fifth and final game, but I don't think the Celtics were really all that invested at that point in the season. Everything was locked up, and the Knicks were still playing for playoff seeding at that point. Before the OG trade, they had nobody that could match up with Tatum and Brown. Harden, DiVincenzo, they try hard, but the Celtics kind of abused both of those guys all season long with the bigger wings and guard players. Bridges has some capability there, and he's a good player. And is it an overpay? Of course it is.
Yeah.
Is it a smart overplay? It very well might be. I think it's a win-win for both teams.
Yeah, exactly.
In that case, you're trying to, it's interesting to see Celtic teams now building up to match up with the Celtics. And that's exactly what's happening here. The OG stuff is interesting to me because earlier in the week, there was a report that they weren't close on money. And so what does that mean going forward? Usually when you hear that, that means OG knows he has an offer out somewhere, right? That is going to be willing to pay him if the Knicks aren't going to go there. And so
makes sense though, doesn't it? I mean, you got Detroit has money, Orlando has money,
Philly has money.
He fits. I mean, great fit for Philly.
If I'm Philly, I'm willing to overpay for a guy like him.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting case there. What's going to happen with him? I think you're right. I think the Knicks really need him. I'm not sure how much better they actually would be with getting Bridges and losing OG. I kind of feel like you're a little bit better with a lot less assets and still not in the Celtics ballpark. And so, you feel like they need to go all in unless, there's flexibility here. Maybe they let him walk and they bring back Hardenstein and they trade Randall for a couple of impact players. So, there are other ways to do it, but on the surface today, it's a good move. I think a lot of it has to do with the dominoes that come next for them.
And the Knicks also, they're in a good place too because they can fill out the rest of their roster. They have 2 first-round picks tonight, so they can fill out their roster with affordable contracts. They can trade back into the
first-round picks after that trade.
They do, yeah. Isn't that crazy? I thought I saw that on Twitter today that they still have their first-round picks tonight.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, if they were included in the deal, then they don't. But if I was the Nets, I don't know if I would want those picks.
I don't know what the picks are. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I know there were unprotected picks. When I hear that, typically means future draft assets, right?
I thought there was a pick from tonight included, but maybe
is there one from tonight?
Yeah. I mean, big scheme of things, I guess it really doesn't matter. The Nets have like 16 picks over the next 4 years.
Yeah, I mean they're the Nets to have those picks. They're in a powerful position to tank and then have $80 million next year, and they're a destination, even though they're not very good. So they could rebuild, maybe similar to how the Celtics rebuilt, right? Maybe they sign their Al Horford and their Isaiah Thomas and have a bridge team while they try to draft the next guy. So. Like you said, good trade for both teams.
And interesting way the Knicks are trying to put it together because if you look at the last few champions, the Celtics, the Nuggets, the Warriors, they all kind of built from in-house, from homegrown players.
Yeah.
This is kind of the old school way of doing this is more along the lines of the Lakers, but they're also this with a superstar who's very small, which is also a different approach.
I will say this though, a superstar is very small. Brunson, not as great in Dallas. He's playing under Tibbs. Look at him now. You look at a lot of these guys. OG when he came to New York, how he's playing now. I expect Tibbs is going to get the best out of Bridges. And you make a good point about New York. That entire roster, none of them are homegrown. All of them brought in through free agency or trades, and they have. Feels like they have good ownership now. Maybe like the next step for the Knicks is
not a good owner, but
not ownership.
management.
Yeah, maybe the next step for the Knicks is James Dolan allowing Charles Barkley back into the building to drop that omen that hangs over the franchise.
Well, the other thing is,
yeah,
it's health with them. If they can stay healthy, you had a foot injury on a small guard, 10 the season
insane.
fronts.
Yeah,
so that's something to watch. And well, Bridges is one of those guys like Tatum and Brown, though, that plays. There's an availability factor for him, and I think that's a skill set. The other trade, Mike, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. I thought the Bulls got fleeced, which is not really all that surprising. I think Josh Giddey is a guy that's up for an extension, who's going to want more than he deserves. There's huge limitations to this game. Not to mention there's the whole moral aspect of bringing on Josh Giddey. It's just shocking to me there wasn't anyone in the Bulls front office or ownership that said, hold on, is this really the move we want to make for Alex Caruso? A guy that's sought after, a guy that can get us picks, a guy that can get us cap relief.
They don't like draft picks in New York, in Chicago.
OKC fleeced them, absolutely fleeced them. It's one of those trades that is bad right away. Maybe Giddey's okay, but it's bad.
I thought Chicago could have got more for Caruso.
Absolutely.
Maybe these guys they have a better eye for talent than you and I do, Jim. Maybe they see something in Giddey, and I'm just saying NBA.
The Bulls really?
Well,
I mean, one of the worst run franchises in all sport.
They are. I think they got LaMelo Ball right, and then he got hurt. He was playing great when he was there, but who knows with Giddey? He's still young, but yeah, I think it's a good move for OKC, not a great move for Chicago. One thing with OKC though is that starting lineup now is really going to lack some outside shooting. I think that's concerning, and they still don't have size.
Well, Caruso shot 40% from three, so he's.
Has he done that consistently in his career though? I feel like that.
I don't know, but he did last year, and I think
Jay Crowder shot 40% before too.
I think what they need is a big to go in there and help.
They certainly do. And I think they may need to move on from Dort, but that's a different conversation.
And they may in 2 years have two top 10, 15 players in SGA and Chet Holmgren. So
they must still have draft picks.
Oh, they got a shit ton, so they can make moves. Yeah,
they got to do something with those picks. I don't know what they. Yeah, yeah.
All right,
the Bulls should have got some of those picks with Giddey. That's what I don't understand.
That's what's crazy.
Like even one.
I know. That's what's so crazy.
Yeah, give me a pick, bro. What are we doing?
I think what you're seeing in the OKC to a lesser extent, I think OKC is trying to build like the Celtics, a lineup like the Celtics have, and I think you're seeing New York
definitely a lesser extent
against the Celtics. I think you're going to see Philly desperately make a move to sign OG and strip him away from the Knicks so they can have a wing defender to compete with the Celtics. And it's going to be a much different offseason than we're used to, where the Celtics are so active. They're going to be teams.
I'll say this:
building to
Philly. If Philly gets OG, they're a contender. They're legit. Contender.
Well, it all comes down to Embiid's health, like every year.
And OG's health.
I feel like nothing really changes with them. It depends. It's all dependent on what Embiid can be health wise. One last thing on this Knicks trade: they spent more than the Celtics did for White and Holiday combined in terms of KP assets. Yeah,
and
KP, which is insane. And I don't think there's a huge drop off. I think Bridges is better than White, but I don't think there's a huge drop off between him and White. So it's a really, which is a nice segue, Mike. See why I did that? Because it's a segue. We're going to segue into how the Celtics got here. And
folks, it's a segue. In case you didn't hear him the first 6 times.
Let's look back. Let's get in our time machine. Let's get in our DeLorean, and let's talk about 2013.
And Marshawn Brooks and Chris Humphries and Gerald fucking Wallace.
Yes, but that season the Celtics went 41-41 or 40-42. I forget. Got knocked out by the Knicks. Rajon Rondo tore his ACL.
Yep.
And they were
playing Terrence Williams, that point guard in the playoffs.
And so the Celtics made this trade, and you talked about all the bad contracts they brought on with the Nets: Wallace, Bogan, Humphries, right? Yeah. And there was Marshawn Brooks, like you said, and the Celtics sent out KG.
Yes, and Jason Terry.
Jason Terry, and of course the Celtics got back those unprotected picks. And I think everyone thought that was a good move at the start. I think we here in Boston thought it was better nationally because we saw a decline in KG and Pierce in their play, and I think we weren't sure how much it was going to elevate the Nets, and there was a chance that those guys were really going to wear down. What no one saw was Deron Williams just completely falling off Deron Williams completely falling off the map and being the useless player, and that Nets team kind of going into a tailspin. And so, they draft James Young with that first pick. It was a nothing player. They draft Kelly Olynyk in that first draft.
Well, no, that first draft was Kelly Olynyk. It was the next draft that was James Young and the white kid there.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. And so they all of a sudden, Nets stink, and it really accelerates the process of where this team is going. But before they even have the opportunity to draft Brown and Tatum, the team starts to win. And Mike, why don't you talk about how they got there?
Got to winning?
Yeah.
Yeah. During that second season under Brad Stevens as a coach, that's when they fleeced the Phoenix Suns using Marcus Thornton's contract to bring in Isaiah Thomas. And so the Celtics made it to the playoffs. I don't know if you remember, on the last game of the season that year, before they got swept by the Cleveland Cavs. And also that offseason, they drafted Marcus Smart, which that was a tough pick to make because Dante Exum was a guy that was highly touted going in, as well as Noah Vonleh. Those were the names we were hearing in Boston with that fifth pick, not Marcus Smart. And I know there were people saying that this isn't a great draft pick. And then they follow up that offseason by drafting Terry Rozier. So that James Young draft was Terry Rozier and James Young and that other kid. It's a white kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And talk about hitting a home run again with, bringing in Terry Rozier and then bringing in Al Horford, right?
And that first big season, was it the following off seasons that they brought in Al Horford, or was it the one after that?
I believe because they had that off season, right. the playoff run with Al and Amir Johnson as their bigs, right?
Yeah, and they got knocked out, and they also courted it failed, but they courted Kevin Durant, and that when they brought Brady and Kelly Olynyk and Isaiah.
But you think about a lot of those moves Danny made too, like he turns like Norm Powell's contract into a first round pick when not Norman Powell, the Powell kid that Dwight Powell plays for Dallas now, included in that Rajon Rondo trade. He moved Jeff Green to bring in assets. And by bringing not just assets in, he brought in Jay Crowder through those trades. Yep. So there were like so many good moves that were like smart additions, and then just nailing the draft picks year back to back is, we bring in Al Horford. What do they do that following offseason? They draft
Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, right?
Jaylen Brown, and in that draft, it was no slam dunk. In fact, there was, you had the Jimmy Butler rumors for that pick. Yep. You had the Paul George rumors. How that unfolded, who pulled back. Danny had said they decided not to make it, but maybe it was the other way around. Who knows? And you also, there was a lot of talk, remember, about Chris Dunn was that pick, the guy from Providence. There was talk about Buddy Hield being that pick. And they went with Jaylen Brown, kind of a unknown quantity for people up here, a guy who went to Cal, and not a basketball, superstar kind of place to go to college. He's a guy that couldn't shoot. And there was a lot of doubt. There was a lot of doubt up here of what he was going to be, but Danny front office saw him for what he was what this athletic wing that was skilled and had a chance to grow. And obviously one of the best player development stories in maybe the history of the Celtics, with how much he has improved year in and year out. In that same offseason, Mike, the next offseason is a big one. So they end up going to the Eastern Conference Finals. Isaiah Thomas was fantastic throughout that run.
Brown came off the bench that year. Yeah.
Brown came off the bench. Everyone knows the story, got hurt. And we go into really what might have been the most pivotal offseason in Celtics history, not because of the moves and trades they brought in for superstar veterans, but because of Danny's draft dealings in 2018. So why don't you talk about that?
Well, what is there to talk about? He traded the number one pick, traded down. He picked up another pick from the Sacramento Kings somehow. And, the Lakers and Philadelphia just really screwed up. And we ended up with Jason Tatum. It was a risky move that Danny Ainge made, and it really pulled off, right?
Most important move in the franchise, I would say,
this decade. I mean, this century.
I know that we look at the KG trade, but that was kind of luck that the way it landed. This was strategy, and this, maybe the last 30 years, this might have been the biggest move.
Yeah, and so obviously the Celtics had some success with that team. They went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Kyrie's last year was a disaster. The offseason following Kyrie leaving.
Well, it's also interesting too, because you don't know how things would have turned out if Gordon Hayward didn't get hurt. What would have meant for the growth of these guys. So that first season was pivotal in different ways that you didn't expect. You had Tatum and Brown completely thrown into the fire. Kyrie and Gordon Hayward got hurt. They lead this team all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, much further than people would have thought.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, there's expectations here where this thing's going to go the following season. Obviously, it's a train wreck with Kyrie. And sorry to steal your thunder there, but it was, and now we start hearing trade rumors that didn't happen, right? You start hearing the Anthony Davis stuff.
Well, thank God, right? And so, and I mean, how good were Rozier and Al Horford on that playoff run? I go back. I went back the other day and was just watching some of the highlights, especially against Philly, the way Al played in that series. It's a gentleman's sweep, and Rozier every home game except Game 7 against Cleveland. And that playoff run was just he was playing like an all-star. Really fun team. And after it kind of fell apart, they rebuilt themselves again. Al Horford and Kyrie left. They were able to bring in Kemba. Gordon Hayward was healthy. And I think that was the closest team comparable to this championship team, because they have 4 guys in their starting lineup that averaged 20 points a game going into the bubble playoff run. And then,
except
of course,
for 2 of those 4 weren't.
2 of those 4 got hurt.
Yeah.
That's what happened. Kemba and Hayward got hurt.
Right before COVID hit, and this is the COVID season, you had the Celtics team playing as good as anybody. Kemba was, and then he got hurt. He got hurt right before COVID hit. And
Hayward got hurt in Game 1 against Philadelphia.
And that was kind of the end of Kemba's career. You didn't know it at the time, but he never was the same player ever again. And like you said, they went into the bubble, and I think at the time we expected them to beat Miami, but they probably what happened is what should have happened.
They weren't ready. And when those guys got hurt, the problem, and this is where Danny fell off a little bit, his benches were just horrible. The Celtics didn't really have reinforcements that could play. They really didn't. Marcus Smart had to hit 6 threes or 7 threes in Game 7 against Toronto for the Celtics to even get out of the second round.
Yeah.
And when you look at that transitions to next offseason, Danny did not have a good offseason, bringing in Tristan Thompson and Jeff Teague, and you had Semi Ojeleye playing major minutes.
You had an injured Kemba on the roster that was not.
Yeah, and that's when Brad stepped into that role following that season, that 2021 season we lost in the first round.
Yeah, I will say the one significant thing that happened in that season from a positive standpoint is there was major growth from Jason Tatum as a player. Like an individual superstar type. He wasn't a great team player at that point yet, but he had 50 points in the playing game against the Wizards. He had
60 against the Spurs that year.
60 against Spurs, and then he had 50 in Game 3 against the Brooklyn Nets. And actually, in one of the few times the Nets had their big 3 together, Harden, Durant, and Irvin, he single-handedly beat them in a game against those guys.
He almost beat them again in Game 5 of that series.
He did, yeah.
Yeah. I've always think back if Jaylen Brown didn't get hurt, that feels like it would have been a deeper series. Rob was playing well in that series too.
And he got hurt too.
Of course, Rob got hurt. Yeah.
And then, like you said, it led to the offseason where the huge monumental change happened again. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, I just think the way Brad handled contracts set them up for the success they have now. He spent that off season. That's when the Marcus Smart extension came in. That's when we were talking about an Evan Fournier extension, but it wasn't. It was they gave Rob Williams his extension, and then he signed. Why can't I think of his name? We traded him in the Spurs trade to get Derek White.
Josh Richardson.
Yeah, Josh Richardson overpaid. I think it was like 10 or 12 million. But what was smart is back then we didn't have those new rules. Now you can combine contracts, and we were talking about it at the time that these were good contracts because they were tradable. And wouldn't you know, that's what led to the roster we have now.
And you forgot about one, maybe the most important one that offseason.
Bringing back Al Horford.
Yep.
And
you had to give
using
up
a draft pick too.
Yeah.
Something Danny wouldn't do to make that happen. Yeah.
And that was a sign of things to come. That was the foreshadowing that Brad was going to be aggressive to bring back veterans to fill out this roster and use draft capital, something that, like you said, Ainge hadn't done. And they brought in Ime Udoka to be the coach.
Yeah.
And so they had just gone through a season where they were a 500 team, backdoored into the playoffs, got beat pretty badly by Brooklyn. And now we're in January and they're 23-22. We're in 2000.
The same team.
22, and it felt like the same team. And then all of a sudden something clicked. They went on this huge run. They trade for Derek White, who everyone said at the time was a huge overpay. We're worried about the 2028 pick swap, the 2029 unprotected pick. How can we do this? What is the Celtics team going to be? He comes in, he doesn't play spectacular to start. And everyone knows the rest of the story. They get to the finals and they lose to Golden State. But within you saw how Brad Stevens was going to work this thing, giving up picks for Al Horford and scouting correctly for a guy that, as turns out, it's just a great, great player in Derek White, which gets us into this next offseason. And once again, it's they make the move at the time we thought was a big deal for Malcolm Brogdon.
It was a big deal.
Yeah, then we get right before preseason's supposed to start, and the earth kind of shatters beneath them, Mike. And you can get into that if you want.
Oh, well. Ime couldn't keep it in his pants. And,
that's exactly it. Yep. That's what we're going to call this pod. We're going to change the name to Ime couldn't keep it in his pants.
Ime had a boner, I don't know what to say about that, but he got fired, and we were like, oh, they need a veteran coach and blah, blah, blah. And they hired this kid who I made fun of for like his first season, and I was completely wrong about him. And a risk on this kid because he had a track record, right? Similar, not similar to Ime, but not great stuff that we're hearing about him, and maybe some like a physical assault or altercation that happened in a bar before. So, it felt like a lot of risks that Brad was taking and trusting this kid. And now you learn years later that Danny was trying to get this kid on the staff, Missoula, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Missoula declined the job because he didn't want to say no to somebody he already said yes to. They really, and a local kid too, right? From Providence. So obviously that worked out great. And the way they played basketball changed. Very analytic driven franchise with Missoula now. And some people don't love that, but obviously this team bought into his philosophy, right?
It's analytical with really high level players that play the right way, unselfish and attack. Right. So I feel like people that don't like it don't really understand what they're seeing. They just thinking it's just analytics. It goes well beyond that. They go through the season then, Mike, and once again it ends in huge disappointment. After falling short against Golden State in the NBA Finals, having that 2-1 lead, they now go down 3-0, can't complete the comeback. Everyone knows the story. Tatum gets hurt. And, if you listen to what Wick said the last couple of days, he actually brought Brad and Missoula in and said, we need to make some structural changes there. There needs to be changes in the foundation for us to get over the hump. And man, did they ever. Yeah.
Did they ever? They let Grant Williams walk, right?
Yeah.
That's fair. Then they move Marcus Smart. And that was probably, I know at the time, really controversial for a lot of us. But obviously the move that needed to be made. Look at Jaylen Brown.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah, look at his leadership now.
I know.
Just with the freedom to be that guy. Marcus was obviously a wonderful person, and
Even the
his personality
decision
was just probably
Tatum's
too cold.
become. I feel like he's not becoming that point forward if Marcus Smart is here. He's not doing that drive and kick with Marcus Smart is here. And I hate to say that because I loved Marcus Smart, but you could see how they played was different, the two of them. I don't think there's any denying that.
No question about it. I mean, Derek White really bails Marcus Smart out of a horrific end to his career as a Celtic, right? So I think this is the way with his buzzer beater in Game 6 in Miami. I think this is what needed to happen. Obviously, they didn't just move Marcus Smart, though they nailed it. I mean, Porzingis came here and is a 20-point scorer, 7 rebounds a game, one of the more efficient scorers on the team, if we're going to be honest. His impact defensively, especially in Game 1 against Dallas, really all season. And then another guy, Malcolm Brogdon, to be able to take him after that injury where he couldn't even score in the NBA Eastern Conference Finals and to turn that into Drew Holiday. Brad's really on the run.
You essentially got Porzingis for 3 guys that were all hurt last year. And
yeah, really.
Rob Williams and Marcus Smart and a couple picks for Holiday and Porzingis. And they were obviously huge. But the real big thing, Mike, is the thing you hit on, is just what it meant for Brown and Tatum and their growth this year. And those picks are the foundation. And they're going to have them both locked up for a long time. They're going to have their core locked up. There's not going to be a lot that goes on into this offseason. There will eventually be moves. Some of the score is going to move next offseason, maybe before that, maybe at the trade deadline. We don't know. I think it's all on the table. I don't see it happening this offseason, but it's eventually happening. The one thing that won't happen is Tatum and Brown. I think we can feel pretty confident that these guys are going to be here for a while. They're going to be the core. They're going to be what they build around. And now that they've overcome so much, in terms of the losses, the failures, the amount of winning and success and the amount of failures, and then to get here is just a really nice story. And I think it bodes well for them just going forward as players and as a franchise.
Yeah.
The Celtics are going to be in this thing for the foreseeable future. I don't know how many they're going to win. I won't try to predict that, but they are going to be contending because of how this was built between Ainge and Stevens and these 2 guys, Tatum and Brown, for the foreseeable future. And my last closing thought, then I'll give it to you. One person I really need to take a mea culpa on is Wick. He's clearly going to spend well into the apron this season. He's scheduled to do it next offseason. I do think they'll cut into that a little bit. But this is what he did not do after 08. They did not re-sign guys. They tried to nickel and dime Rondo. They tried to nickel and dime Ray Allen. They traded Perkins. This is what they did not do, was increase salaries. They let Posey walk. So to see them locking up guys early and to see them being willing to spend to keep a championship nucleus together, you couldn't ask for anything more than the effort out of your ownership group. So, I gotta take a step back and give kudos there. Mike, and I'll let you close this thing out.
Yeah, I'm glad they're running it back. I think for Brad, now it's just a challenge of finding the right guys at the end of the roster, right? And seeing if he can find a way to keep Cornette. I think that's important with Kristaps' off-season surgery, maybe trying to ensure that you keep Cornette on the roster. You seem to be a fit here. But yeah, they got the draft tonight. I don't know what they're going to do. I think with the 30th pick, you're probably looking to trade back, so you have roster flexibility. But I'm sure if Brad sees a guy that he likes, he'll take him. But there's not a lot of room here.
No,
I think it's
whoever they take tonight or tomorrow, depending on when they pick, is going to be a Maine.
Yeah, they're going to be in Maine. Yeah, I'd say an off-season goal is probably you're looking to bring in a guy who might become Sam Housen's replacement, and you're looking for a big that can play, that can fill in on nights that KP and Al can't play. And so last year that was Cornette and Keita, and I'd be fine with that again. But if Cornette's going to walk, they got to find his replacement.
And we're going to dig a lot more into the offseason starting our next pod. And we have off-season goals here on the Hard Foul podcast. And we're going to try to bring in special guests, and we may have a national NBA writer on with us in our next pod to talk Celtics offseason draft and all that stuff. So, looking forward to that, and looking forward to, connecting with everyone in here and keep talking Celtics, keep winning.
Stop, drop, kaboom. Ime rubs on his nipples. Go Celtics.